Nigeria finally strikes back, however, Japan's guardian is here. Hey, what's going on guys, Ace here, and today we are going to review the very late spoilers of chapter 316. And I gotta say, this chapter must bring us some Nigerian action, because the way things are going, this game is proving to be the most boring one, with Japan honestly facing no competition from Nigeria whatsoever. However, with more than half of the game still remaining, I still hold hope for Nigeria to at least do something. I mean, sure, at this point we don't expect them to beat Japan, however, at least they need to try something. But without any further ado, let's jump into the chapter, which starts with the following statement. Now, with 2 furious goals, Japan is in the lead, as we get this panel of the clock of the game, showing that only 10 minutes are left for the first half, and I gotta say, this is the bullshit of Blue Lock. You mean to tell me the whole PXG game only happened in 30 minutes? Yet here, whatever the hell this was, I mean 4 or 5 attacks at best, happened in the span of 35 minutes, I don't know, I don't believe it, I don't buy it whatsoever. Like the craziness that was PXG versus Bayern Munich, with 5 goals, the pros coming in and the back and forth we've seen. Yet we are meant to believe that the little things that happened in the Nigerian game actually span more than that craziness? I don't know about this. I understand we need suspension of disbelief for shonen manga, but this is a little bit too much for me. Like, at least give us a chapter of things happening randomly, so at least we feel the passing of time. This way it honestly feels cheap, However, I'm not going to focus a lot on this point, and so let's move on. And I gotta say this now, that the translation for some of these panels is missing. However, I will do my best to explain what is happening in this chapter. But first, the announcers are going crazy, because Nigeria is going on the attack, and so could Japan stop them one more time? As then we cut to Unaji, who has the ball, and as always, immediately after getting it, he gives it to Kuso, and at the same time we can see Isagi running towards Unazi. However, the more interesting aspect about all of this is actually Kuso's monologue, because he seems to have cracked down what Japan is doing. You see, instead of Isagi being the brains behind the team, it's actually a 3-man job. We have Isagi of course in the attack, Karasu holding down the middle, and Aiko on the back. And as you all know, these 3 are the smartest players in Blue Lock. And so Kuso right here is on money, because he figured out what Japan is doing. A team that is not actually focused on just one player, but at least it has 3 factions of players. Those who follow Isagi, those who follow in Karasu's footsteps, and of course the defense following Aiko. And I honestly just love this, because it shows that, as I said, Kuso is the brains of the team. Maybe Unazi is the heart who is pumping the blood throughout the team, but Kuso is actually the one doing all the thinking for Nigeria. And I gotta say, he must feel overwhelmed here, because he has to face 3 of the smartest players ever. And so I am actually interested in how he is going to deal with them. In any case, however, through his dribbling he makes it down the midfield, and there he is met by Karasu, who excels at dueling. And Kuso here has no option but to pass. However, he is very wary of Isagi, and so he gives a very long and a very hard pass to Unazi, trusting that only the Nigerian ace will be able to catch it. And that turns out to be the case, because even though Bachura and Chigiri are there, they are unable to rival Unazi in the air, and so he gets the ball. However, then we get a flashback, and it is a continuation of last chapter's flashback after Unazi scored the goal. There he is celebrated by his teammates, because they really love someone who is amazing as him. And he is taken by surprise by this, because he did not expect them to actually welcome him like this, and so this is just a wholesome moment. However then, as the attack is being built up, we get the remaining of the flashback from the other player's perspective. First Bello, who receives the first pass from Unazi, and then from the tall defender Oba, who is in the back watching them. And I gotta say, here I really wish we had translation, because they seem to be saying important stuff, and so you have to bear with me guys, because I'm just happy we got the chapter after all of this delay. In any case, however, the chapter carries on with the flashback, and as I said, it seems way too important for us not to get the translation. However, the gist of it is that the trio is happy with Unazi being with them, because he is very capable of playing football, and so it's going to be more fun. And I love that Unazi is very happy as well, because as I said, he did not expect them to welcome him this good. And so from this moment on, they are like family to him. And I gotta say, this is just wholesome, and we need a Nigerian goal. At least their efforts should be met with some results. However, and speaking of results, during the flashback, we actually get some newspapers showing the results of the Nigerian team, how the U20 team is actually winning games and even winning them with 6-0 scores, meaning they are so dominant in the African continent. At the same time, it seems that Onazi is the light of the team, carrying the whole Nigerian dreams on his back. And I love this because we got this right after a conversation between Kuso and Onazi, which means I think this is a hint again that Kuso might be the key to Onazi's awakening. He will be the key to Nigeria scoring a goal. In the next panel, we actually get a very important scene, with Nigeria actually winning the U20 African Cup. And so this means they will be the strongest African team in the competition. This is a little bit worrying for me, because if the strongest team is like this, then the rest of the African teams will just get decimated, and I definitely would not like to see that. I would love to see some diversity of teams in the finals. In any case, however, after the flashback, we see that Kuso has the ball. And again, the timer shows that only 1 minute is remaining in the game. You mean to tell me Nigeria took more than 10 minutes to build just one attack? This shit doesn't make sense whatsoever, man. And I don't like that the writer is so blatant like this, because if you remember the U20 game, a lot of shit happened in just 1 minute. I understand he is trying to get the game over with, but this is a little bit too much for me. It's not believable whatsoever. However, and again, I'm ranting too much about this. Immediately after Kuso gets the ball, we see that Karasu is back on him. And of course, he's not alone because they are actually close to the goal, and so Aryu comes to help him. And they actually succeed in pinching Kuso to the corner. However, and again, he thinks back of what Onazi could do, and he gives yet another crazy pass. This time with an insane curving trajectory that honestly left Aryu and Karasu shook. However, and despite the pass being very extreme, Onazi is of course very agile and he will meet it in the air. And of course, you already know it, Isigi expected this and so did Aiko. And so the duo go and press Onazi. However, to their surprise, Onazi jumps into the air and tries to direct shoot the ball, meaning he did not give them any time to react to the pass. And I gotta say, I love this, because it seems that Kuso and Onazi actually understood what Isigi usually does, because he always shows at the last moment. The best way to deal with him, other than Ren did, is actually to take an extreme shot that Isigi's physicality would not allow him to react to. And again, I just love this about Nigeria, because it shows they are actually thinking about what they are doing. And by the way, even though Aiko was next to Onazi, he was not able to get the ball. As you all know, Aiko is a demon in the air. However, it seems that Onazi is actually better than him, because the pass actually traveled between Aiko and Onazi, and the Japanese snake could not snatch it. However, Onazi was able to meet it. And so I think when it comes to the aerial battles, Onazi might be even better than Aiko, maybe on the level of Aryu, or hell, maybe even better. And this honestly gives me a very interesting matchup between Onazi and Kunigami to see who is the most dominant striker in the air. However, and carrying on with the chapter, as Onazi is about to shoot, we actually get the perspective from Japan's guardian, Gagamaru Jin. And as you can guess, because we are focusing on another player, we get a small flashback of its special training. However, for Gagamaru, it actually makes a lot of sense, because the flashback starts with Ego saying, Gagamaru, you're still just fighting by relying on prayer. Build the body that would react to your instincts. Experience this special knock training. And then as we cut to Gagamaru's training, he is actually practicing against a baseball machine. And I honestly love this, because as Ego says, since the ball here is faster and smaller than the regular soccer ball, your reaction time must improve. And Gagamaru here actually definitely feels it, because he says, through using baseballs, I feel like my coordination between my eyes and body becomes 1.5 times faster, which honestly is just insane if you think about it. And it seems that Ego is not just trying to teach Gagamaru to react with head, he also is trying to build muscle memory for his jumps. As he tells him, do not only think about it with your head, let your body remember the motion. Let your body remember what you can do. And honestly, we get these cool shots of Gagamaru actually trying to catch the baseballs, and he is successful at a lot of times, which means Gagamaru right now is a very scary goalkeeper. If he can catch baseball balls, then you need to have a cannon for a shot in order to score over him. Or instead, you could do what Uber was doing and do a stealth kill shot. In any case, however, after that special training, we get get back to the match as we see Onaze finally shoots. And I love this panel because it shows Isagi actually shook, but at the same time it seems that he expected this. And before we actually move to what happens, I gotta talk about something. If Onaze is this insane due to his stamina and his agility, what will happen against Bunny and Spain? The guy is quite literally unstoppable in the air, and so how would Japan react to him? If they cannot stop him head on, then they really need a very solid plan. However, that's neither here nor there. Now let's carry on with the game we have at our hands. As we see Gagamaru reacting to Onaze's shot, and he says to himself, a trajectory that is escaping and rising upwards. This will be hard to stop. However, my body is moving on its own. This shot, despite being amazing, it's slower than a baseball. And so, even though I can't catch it, I can at least deflect it. And then Gagamaru shouts, I am Japan's guardian. As the chapter ends with the end of the first half and Gagamaru celebrating. And we can see in the background Kusu being very furious with this result. It seems that my theory will be true. He might be the one to pull off the impossible and give Japan a run for their money. However, with this, the chapter concludes with Gagamaru simply saying, leave it to me, I am your guardian. To be continued in the next chapter, I want to win. Now, to be honest, this was a very straightforward chapter, and other than the missing translation, it was a really good experience because we at least got to see the Nigerian level when they actually try. And to be honest, they are very impressive now because they broke through the defense and were only stopped by Gagamaru, which, as you all know, is a crazy goalkeeper, and so I give them that. However, if I gotta say, my only complaint about the chapter is actually the time. This shit makes no sense whatsoever. Why would Nigeria take 10 minutes to build just one attack? And it wasn't like a hard build up or anything, it was a fast-paced attack in order to take Japan by surprise. However, the writer wants us to believe that it happened on the span of 10 minutes, which honestly is just bad writing at this point. However, I think that's all for this chapter. I really hope you enjoyed the video, guys, and until next time, thank you for watching.